Her hands were already covered in blood when she heard the baby cry for the first time. Not in a hospital, not under clean lights with sterile gloves and a full team. On the cracked asphalt of Mapogu intersection, with flames eating the front of a crushed sedan, with the sound of sirens still 7 minutes away, with one dead woman's last breath still warm in the air between them. The woman had looked at her. Not at the sky, not at the smoke. At her. And she had said 3 words that Zola Minsa was going to spend the next year of her life trying to outrun. Please, be his mother. That was how it started. Not with a knock on a door or a glance across a room, or any of the soft, romantic machinery that love stories usually require. It started with blood and wreckage and a promise she never agreed to make. And the man at the center of all of it, the one whose name made grown men lower their voices in boardrooms and back alleys and every gray space Seoul had to offer, that man had no idea any of this had happened. Not yet. His name was Kwon Ixio. And when he found out, everything was going to change. Welcome to Cross-World Romance Besties. If this story already has your heart in your throat, you are exactly where you are supposed to be. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs a good story today, subscribe so you never miss what we drop next, and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Let us get into it. The thing about being a midwife in Seoul is that the city does not care how tired you are. Zola had been on her feet for 14 hours by the time she finally walked out of Udo Women's Clinic at 7:43 in the evening. 14 hours. 2 emergency deliveries, 1 cord complication that had her heart rate spiking for 20 solid minutes, a mother who had changed her mind about the epidural 3 times, and an administrative audit that her supervisor had decided today, of all days, was the right moment to conduct. She had not eaten since 11 in the morning. Her back had been making a sound since around 4 that she was choosing not to investigate. The soles of her sneakers felt like cardboard. Her scrubs smelled like hard work and long hours, and every decision she had made and had not made across the span of a very unforgiving shift. She stepped into the cold November air and felt nothing, which was not accurate. She felt everything, but in the particular way that exhaustion compresses feeling, the way it takes the full weight of a day and flattens it into a single dull ache somewhere behind the sternum that has no specific name. She sat down on the bench outside the clinic. This was the part she always allowed herself. 5 minutes. Just 5. Before the bus, before the commute, before the small apartment in Mapo that she had been telling herself was temporary for the past 2 years. 5 minutes where she did not have to be in motion, did not have to be competent, did not have to be anything other than a woman who was very, very tired sitting on a bench in Seoul. She thought about the second delivery of the day. A first-time mother, 26, who had come in 4 centimeters dilated and certain she was dying, and Zola had spent 40 minutes doing nothing but being a presence in the room, talking, not reassuring in the hollow way that words sometimes get used for reassurance, but actually talking, about the process, about what the body was doing and why, about the fact that pain and danger are not the same thing. And by the time they were at 8 centimeters, the woman had said, "You have the most calming voice," which was one of the nicest things anyone had ever said to Zola, and she had kept it with her all day. She thought about the cord complication at 11. The way the room had changed when the monitoring showed what it showed. The way the senior resident's face had gone controlled. The specific controlled quality of someone not allowing themselves to feel the urgency, because the urgency had to wait. She had been in that moment for 12 seconds before the response organized itself, and her hands found the positions they knew, and the crisis passed the way crises sometimes pass, quickly and completely, leaving you shaking slightly on the inside and still in your body on the outside. She thought about the woman's face afterward, the way she had looked at her baby, and then at Zola with an expression that was too large for words, and that Zola had received without needing to name. These were the reasons she did this work. Not the salary, which was honest. Not the status, which was modest. These moments. These specific rooms. This particular way of being present for the hardest and most extraordinary thing a human body can do. She was good at being in those rooms. She was better in those rooms than she was in most other places. And today she had been in them for 14 hours, and her body was telling her it needed the alternative, needed the yellow curtain and the plants and the slippers and the flat horizontal distance from all of it. She had a bruise forming on her left forearm where a patient had grabbed her during a contraction. She had a text from her mother in Accra that she had not answered for 3 days because answering it required a version of herself she did not currently have access to. She had 62,001 in her account until Friday. She had a pair of house slippers at home that she had been thinking about since approximately 2 in the afternoon. This was her life. It was not a bad life. She had decided this, clearly and deliberately, because she had learned that decisions made clearly and deliberately tend to hold better than ones made in the fog of feeling. She had trained for 4 years. She had left Ghana at 23 with 2 suitcases and a certainty that turned out to be both correct and much harder than she had imagined. She was good at her work. Genuinely good. The kind of good that does not require anyone to say it out loud because you feel it in the room when things go right. She was also alone in a way that had nothing to do with geography, and she had decided not to think about that either. She stood up after 4 minutes instead of 5 because the cold was starting to get into her knees, and the bus came in 7 minutes, and she could not miss it. She picked up her bag. She took 3 steps toward the curb, and the world collapsed. It was a sound before it was anything visual. A sound like physics breaking. Like the moment steel decides it does not want to be a car anymore. A massive gray SUV had come through the intersection running a red and caught a blue sedan broadside at full speed. The sedan spun. The SUV flipped. A second car, a small white hatchback, had nowhere to go and took the sedan's back end. And the whole terrible sequence of it happened in approximately 3 seconds that felt like 3 minutes. The way disaster always plays with time. Zola stopped. Later, she would not be able to explain exactly what she felt in those first seconds. It was not fear. Fear requires the brain to process something as a threat directed at you. This was something else. This was the particular stillness that comes to certain people in chaos. Her body going quiet in the way it went quiet during cord complications. Everything narrowing to assessment. There were people already on their phones. Voices cutting through the smoke and the hissing of something under a hood. Someone was screaming. A man in a gray coat was crouching near the overturned SUV, and she could see his mouth moving as he spoke to someone inside. And then she saw the sedan. It was the one that had been caught broadside. The one that had taken the full force. It was sitting against the concrete barrier of the intersection at an angle that told her immediately that the impact had been catastrophic for the left side of the vehicle. The front passenger door was gone. Not crumpled. Gone. The driver's side had folded inward. She should not have walked toward it. She was exhausted. She was off duty. There were already people calling emergency services. She had done 14 hours and her body was asking her for one thing, which was to please not do more. She walked toward it. Later she would say she did not decide to. That it was more like the clinic training walking her toward it. Muscle memory pulling her feet in a direction her mind was still catching up with. She reached the sedan. The driver's door was compressed beyond opening. She got to the window. The woman inside was young. Early 30s, Zola thought. She was Korean. She was wearing a pale yellow coat that was now red. Her head had struck the side window during impact, and the window had won. There was a gash above her left temple that was bleeding in the way that head wounds bleed, which is to say alarmingly, generously, the kind of bleeding that looks like the worst thing you have ever seen and is sometimes survivable and sometimes is not. The frame had bent inward from the impact, crushing the door into the seat, pinning the woman's legs from the waist down beneath the collapsed dashboard. There was no moving her. There was no extracting her. Not without equipment. Not without a team. Even if the best trauma surgeon in Seoul had been standing at that intersection at that exact moment, the structural wreckage of that car would have made survival for this woman a calculation that did not resolve in her favor. Zola understood this. She understood it in the particular clear way that people who work with life and death understand things they wish they did not understand. She looked lower. The woman was heavily pregnant. 8 months, maybe 34 weeks, from the look of it. And she was conscious. Her eyes were open and they found Zola immediately with the specific clarity that people sometimes have in the moments when the body knows something the mind has not been told yet. Zola got on the phone. Emergency services. The number connected in 2 rings, and she reported location, vehicle type, the head wound, the pregnancy, the status of the other vehicles. She was told units were responding. She was told 7 to 10 minutes. She looked at the woman. She looked at the blood. She did not say out loud that 7 to 10 minutes was a calculation this woman's body was not going to cooperate with. She stayed on the line and tried the door again. The frame was locked tight, and without equipment, there was no moving it. She could not get the woman out, and she could not bring help closer, and all she could do right now was be present. Be a voice. Keep the woman with her. Can you hear me? She said. I'm a midwife. I'm right here. You are not alone. The woman moved her lips. What's your name? Zola asked. Mira, the woman said. Her voice was thin, pressurized, the voice of someone breathing around pain. Shin Mira. Okay, Mira. I'm Zola. I need you to stay with me. Help is coming. Myra's eyes went to her own belly, then back to Zola. And in the look was a question that Zola understood because she had understood it in delivery rooms for years. Not am I going to be okay? That was not what Mira was asking. Mira was asking about the baby. I know, Zola said quietly. I know. She was back on the phone. Updating. Repeating the pregnancy. Pressing for the ETA. The dispatcher's voice was controlled, professional, steady in the way that told her the dispatcher had given this particular kind of news before, and the news was that 7 to 10 minutes was the best they had. 7 to 10 minutes. Zola looked at Shin Mira and understood that 7 to 10 minutes was not going to be the shape of this evening. Myra's breathing had changed. She was breathing in a particular way that Zola recognized not from emergency response, but from delivery rooms. That specific quickening. That involuntary drawing in. This baby was not going to wait. She called emergency services again. The operator said 6 minutes. She called again at 4 minutes. She called at 2. She was still on the phone when her hands were already doing the other thing. The only thing she could do. Working through the broken passenger window in the dark with no equipment, in the wrong angle, and a crowd of strangers watching from 10 feet away. She kept talking to Mira while her hands found the right positions in the impossible dark of a crushed sedan at a Seoul intersection in November. She kept telling her to breathe. She kept saying, stay with me. She meant every word. She always meant it. That is the thing about Zola Mensa that mattered in this moment and every moment before it. She was not the kind of person who had stopped believing in the room she was in. She was tired, yes. She was underprepared, yes. She meant it anyway. She worked anyway. She did her job. Shin Jaemin arrived into the world at 7:59 in the evening, 12 minutes after a gray SUV decided to run a red light. He was crying before Zola had fully understood what was happening. A sound like an argument, thin and outraged, which is exactly what a newborn cry sounds like, and it is always, every single time, the most startling sound in the world. She had him wrapped in her own jacket before she registered taking it off. He was small and red and furious about existing in such circumstances, and she held him against her chest, and his crying did not stop, and she said, I know, in a low voice that she did not plan. She looked at Mira. Mira was looking at the baby, past Zola, through the window and the smoke and the dark, just looking at him. And she was smiling. The kind of smile that is not for anyone else. The kind that is just a mother's eyes finding her child in the world for the first and last time simultaneously. He is my little champion, Mira said. The words came out softly. She was fighting for each one. Don't let them hurt my baby. Her hand reached. Her fingers found the edge of the window frame. Please. Her eyes went to Zola's face with an intensity that Zola felt in her sternum. Be my baby's mother for me. I don't want him to live without a mother. Zola said, stay with me, Mira. Stay with me. The sirens arrived at 8:02. Shin Mira was declared dead on arrival at Mapo Severance at 8:27. She was 31 years old. She had been driving home from her last prenatal appointment. They found a hospital bag in the back seat, packed and ready, the kind of careful preparation that says this was a woman who was planning to come home. If you are still here and your heart is already broken, I need you to subscribe right now and drop a comment that just says Mira so we know you felt her. Because this story is just beginning, and the baby in Zola's arms that night was about to change 2 lives in ways neither of them could see coming. Stay with me. Zola sat in the hospital waiting area for 2 hours. She did not know why she stayed. She told herself she was giving a statement to the police, which was true for the first 40 minutes. Then the police left, and she was still sitting in the orange plastic chair with her blood-stained scrubs and no jacket, and Jaemin's cry still living somewhere in the back of her chest, where she had been unable to reach it. A nurse brought her a blanket without asking. Zola thanked her and did not put it on. She was not thinking about anything in particular. That was the strange thing. After 14 hours of being in constant mental motion, after the accident, after everything her hands had done tonight, Her mind had gone very quiet. It was not peace. It was the quiet of a room after something enormous has passed through it. Shin Jae-min was in the NICU. He was 3.1 kilograms. He was breathing on his own. He was, by all available evidence, fine. Startled into existence in the worst possible conditions and fine. Babies are frequently more durable than the world deserves. She was thinking about going home. She was thinking about the house slippers. She was thinking about the way Myra's hand had found the window frame. A man came through the hospital doors at 10:17. She noticed him the way you notice weather when it changes without warning. He moved differently than the people around him. Not quickly, not loudly, just with the particular density of someone who occupies more gravity than the average person, as if the air around him had a different specific weight. He was tall, dark suit, dark coat, dark everything, and a face that was handsome in the way that men are handsome when they have never once had to be charming. He did not need charm. He had something else. Something that was not warmth, but looked adjacent to it from a distance, and was, on closer examination, something much more complicated than warmth. Two men walked behind him and slightly to each side in the configuration that Zola had learned from 2 years of living in Seoul and paying attention means things about the man walking in front. He went straight to the desk. She could not hear what he said. She watched the desk nurse's face change. The particular flattening of professional composure when someone has delivered information that the nurse was not prepared to receive. Then the man turned. And for a moment, before his eyes found the desk or the corridor or the direction of the NICU, they crossed the waiting area and landed on Zola. She was sitting there in blood-stained scrubs with no jacket and someone's hospital blanket folded in her lap. She probably looked like a person who had been through something. Because she had. His eyes stayed on her face for 1 second longer than a glance. Then he looked away. She looked away. A young nurse named Lee Hyejin came and sat beside her a little while later, clearly having drawn the short straw in terms of who had to deliver difficult news to the woman in the waiting area who was still sitting there 3 hours after giving a statement. Hyejin said the baby was doing well. The NICU team said he was strong, he breathed well, and that the father had been contacted and was on his way. Zola said okay. Hyejin said, I am sorry for what you had to do tonight. That was not fair. Zola said, fairness is not really the operative category in emergency medicine. Hyejin said, still. Zola said, still. Yes. She went home at 10:45. The next morning she went to work because there was nothing else to do with the thing that had happened the night before except to continue being alive in the practical ways that being alive requires. Her supervisor, a small precise woman named Dr. Bay who communicated primarily through silence and expectation, called her in at 9, told her flatly that Zola's intervention at the scene had been documented by multiple bystanders and that the responding paramedics had confirmed that without her the infant would not have survived, and then told her she looked terrible and to go home. Zola went back to her desk. By noon she had received 3 requests for interviews from news outlets, all of which she deleted. She had eaten a triangle of kimbap from the convenience store downstairs. She had done her job. The voicemail she listened to at 1:15 in a toilet cubicle was from a man who identified himself as Park Dong-hyun, assistant to Kwon Ik-seo, and who said, in the careful cadence of someone who had been trained to deliver difficult information efficiently, that Mr. Kwon wished to meet with her at her earliest convenience regarding the events of the previous evening and the care of his son, Shin Jae-min, whom he intended to bring home as soon as the hospital cleared the infant for discharge. His son. Zola sat with that for a moment. She called the number back. Park Dong-hyun answered on the first ring and arranged everything in under 4 minutes with a smoothness that suggested he arranged things for a living and was very good at it. She met Kwon Ik-seo the following evening at a restaurant in Mapo that she would later learn he had cleared of its other reservations for the night, a detail that did not become clear to her until she arrived and found the entire establishment empty except for a single table. She walked in wearing a wool coat and her good boots, and the expression she wore when she was walking into something she did not have complete information about, which was professional and measured and gave nothing away. He was already there, already standing, which she noticed because men who have power do not usually stand when someone arrives. They tend to perform a kind of stillness that says you are arriving in my space. He stood. She sat down first anyway. Up close he was more precisely himself than he had been at a distance. The kind of face that age had only organized, had only sharpened into its final form. He was maybe 37, maybe 38. There were fine lines at the corners of his eyes that had not come from laughing. His hands on the table were still, and she noticed, because she was trained to notice hands, that they were not entirely still. The faintest tension in the knuckles. A man practicing a calm he was not entirely feeling. "I was told you saved my son," he said. "I delivered your son," she said. "The paramedics saved him. The NICU team saved him. I was just there." He looked at her for a moment. "I was also told you stayed. At the hospital. After." She had not expected that. She kept her face even. "I was giving a statement." "The statement was completed by 9, he said. "You stayed until nearly 11. She was quiet. "I would like to thank you," he said. "Properly. Whatever that means to you. I would like it to be something real." She looked at him. He was not performing gratitude. She had seen performed gratitude. It had a particular quality, a softness around the edges that real feeling does not have. This was not that. This was a man who was very uncomfortable with the specific vulnerability of being in debt to a stranger and was doing it anyway, because the debt was real. "I do not need to be thanked," she said. "I did what anyone would have done." "That is not true," he said, quietly, without emphasis, as if it were just a fact. "Most people did not do what you did." The paramedics documented the scene. "You were working with nothing. You stayed with her." He told her about Jamin. The baby was being discharged in 4 days. He had a household. He had resources. He had already engaged 2 of the most reputable nanny agencies in Seoul. He did not have. He paused. He looked at the table for a moment, then back at her, and it was the first time she saw something change in his face. Not weakness. Something more specific. The particular expression of a man trying to find the exact honest word for a thing he had not said out loud before. "Mira asked me once," he said, "before the pregnancy was far along, what I would do if something happened to her. I told her nothing was going to happen to her. She said that was not what she asked. She said she wanted Jamin to have someone who would hold him like he was the most important thing in the world. Not staff. Not efficiency. Someone who already knew what it was to be in a room when everything was at stake, and to choose to stay." Zola understood what he was asking before he finished saying it. "I am a midwife, not a nanny," she said. "I know," he said. "I have a full-time position. I know that too. I am not asking you to be his nanny. I am asking you to help me not get this wrong. Until I know what right looks like." The restaurant was quiet around them. Outside the window, Seoul moved in its ordinary Friday evening way. People and cars and light bouncing off the Han River in the distance. Zola looked at this man and thought about Myra's hand on the window frame. She thought about the way Jamin had cried, that outraged arguing sound. "I will help with the transition," she said, "until you have proper care established." "Thank you," he said. They ordered food they barely ate. They talked for 2 hours, not about anything important, or rather about everything that surrounded the important thing without touching it. He asked questions that were careful and specific. She answered them the same way. He did not perform warmth, and she did not either, and something about that was easier than she had expected. When she left, he did not walk her out. He stood again when she stood, which she had already decided she was not going to keep noticing, and he said her name as she reached the door. "Zola." It was the first time he had said it. She turned. "Mira," he said. "She was good. I want you to know that." "I know she was," she said. She went home and sat with her house slippers on and thought about what she had just agreed to. The answer, it turned out, was considerably more than she had planned for. And here is where I need you to drop a comment right now, because we are about to go somewhere this story has never been before. Subscribe if you have not yet. This is the part where everything gets complicated, and I need you with me. Jamin came home on a gray Tuesday morning in a car seat that cost more than Zola's monthly rent. She had not intended to be there. She had offered to come in the afternoons, after her clinic shifts, to help with the transition, the term they were both using for the specific temporary nature of her presence in this arrangement. She had been very clear about temporary. He had agreed, which had been smooth enough that she had stored it in the part of her brain that files things to examine later. She was there on Tuesday morning because Park Dong-hyun had sent her a message at 7 that said simply, "The hospital has cleared him for discharge this morning," and something in her, some unexamined reflex that had nothing to do with professional obligation, had made her call the clinic and say she would be an hour late. The apartment was in a tower in Mapo, the kind of tower that has a lobby with original art and a security desk and elevators that opened directly into the residence. This was quieter than anywhere she had been. Dark lines and wide windows. Everything considered and precise, nothing accidental. Artwork she did not have words for. A kitchen that looked designed by someone who had never personally made breakfast. And in the middle of all this intended elegance, Park Dong-hyun was setting up a crib with the slightly desperate competence of a man who had been given a task that was 17% outside his skill set. Kwon Ixio came in behind her carrying the car seat with the intensity of a man who had probably never carried anything fragile in his life, treating this particular fragile thing with an attention that made every other competency he had looked casual by comparison. He put the car seat down on the living room rug. They both looked at Jaemin. Jaemin was asleep. He was not doing anything. He was just a very small person who was completely indifferent to the architectural gravity of his surroundings. He was beautiful in the way that newborns are sometimes beautiful, which is to say in a way that bypasses every critical faculty a person has and goes straight for something that has no name. Zola carried Jaemin to the nursery and settled him in the crib, rearranged two things, and he did not wake. He had the sleeping style of someone with complete confidence in the world, which was something she hoped he would manage to keep. She turned around. Kwon Ixio was standing in the doorway. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his son. The expression on his face was one of the most honest things she had ever seen on a person, and it was gone in about 4 seconds, replaced with the particular composure she was already learning to recognize as his default. But she had seen it. "He is going to be fine," she said. "I know," he said. He said it like someone who needed to believe it and was committing to the belief anyway. The days settled into a shape she had not planned for. She came after her clinic shifts. She showed him how to hold Jaemin during feeding, how to read the difference between the hungry cry and the overstimulated cry, how to swaddle with confidence, because newborns can feel hesitation in your hands, and they do not appreciate it. He was a fast learner. He paid attention with his whole body. When she showed him something, he actually understood it. He asked questions that showed he had been thinking between visits. One evening he asked her why Jaemin settled faster with her, and she told him it was because she was the first person Jaemin had heard, that he knew her voice. "Will that go away?" he asked. Eventually, "Yes," she said. "And in the meantime?" She looked at him. He was looking at Jaemin. "In the meantime, you talk to him. A lot. About everything. The more he hears your voice, the more he will know it. He will learn you." "Okay," he said. And from that day forward, Kwon Ixio talked to his son about everything. She arrived one evening to find him explaining, in a low, even voice, the structural mechanics of the Mapo Bridge as Jaemin stared at the ceiling with the focused expression of a baby examining reality for the first time. She arrived another evening to find him reading quarterly projections aloud, which she told him was a questionable choice of content, and he said in absolute seriousness that Jaemin seemed to prefer the sound of numbers, and she laughed before she could stop herself, and he looked at her when she laughed with an expression that lasted slightly too long for someone who was not feeling something. She registered it. She filed it under things to not think about. The agencies sent nanny candidates. She sat in on 2 of the interviews because he said he wanted a second assessment, and she was the only person whose judgment of Jaemin's needs he trusted at this point. Both candidates were highly qualified. Both would have been fine. She went home after the second interview and thought about fine. She sat with her slippers on and thought about how Jaemin had cried when she put him down that evening. That particular reaching cry, and how it had stopped the moment she picked him up again, and she thought about Myra's hand on the window frame and the 3 words, and she thought about a lot of things. The following morning she called in late again and told him she would stay through the month, just to stabilize the routine. He said he appreciated that. He did not say he had not found either candidate acceptable. She did not say she had known he would not. They were both, she was beginning to understand, extremely good at not saying things. The month became 6 weeks. The 6 weeks became 2 months. She had stopped counting at some point, which she noticed, and which told her something. She told herself it was Jaemin. Jaemin was not entirely a lie. He had grown to know her face the way newborns grow to know the faces that are always there, with a completeness that is not yet love, but is the foundation of love, the raw material of it. He tracked her across the room with his eyes. He made the sound. She had learned his specific rhythms, the cry that meant tired but fighting it, the cry that meant actually hungry versus the cry that meant I want to be held, which were sometimes identical and sometimes not. She had learned how to tell the difference. And this was something Ixio watched her do with an attention that was not professional curiosity. She told herself it was professional duty. Professional duty did not explain the novel notes. It did not explain the evening she arrived and found him standing at the kitchen counter eating leftover rice directly from the container with a focused expression as though this was a serious task requiring his full attention, and she had stood in the doorway for a moment before announcing herself and felt something shift in her chest like a piece of furniture moved to where it was supposed to have been all along. It did not explain the fact that she had started keeping a change of clothes at the apartment. Just practical things. For the mornings she stayed in the guest room after late evenings. Just practical things that had their own drawer now in the guest room dresser, which Park had cleared without being asked, and which Zola had noticed on the Tuesday. She opened the wrong drawer and found it empty and ready. She had closed the drawer and gone to find Jamin and not said anything. But she had thought about it. There was a man at her clinic. He had been coming in for 3 weeks, always at the same time, always just after her shift started, always with a reason that was medically mild. A follow-up. A form to sign. A question about something administrative. His name was Choi Juno. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative, and he was attractive in the uncomplicated way that men are attractive when they have decided to be attractive at you and are not being subtle about it. He asked her to dinner on the 3rd week. She said she was not able to date people connected to the clinic. He said technically he was not connected to the clinic, only to a supplier that had a contract with the clinic. She said that was a technical distinction. He said he had been told he was quite good at those. She said no. She said it pleasantly. She meant it. What she did not know was that Choi Juno came back the following week, and that week Kwon Ixio was sitting in his car outside the clinic waiting for her, because they had plans that evening. Park Dong-hyun noticed Choi Juno leave the clinic at the same time as Zola, noticed them exchange words at the entrance, noticed Choi Juno's body language, which was the body language of a man pressing where pressing had not been invited. He did not say anything to Ixio. He did not need to. Ixio was already watching. She got into the car, said hello, and told him she was hungry, and could they please stop for tteokbokki because she had been thinking about it for approximately 4 hours, and she was not above roadside food regardless of what Park thought about that. Park said he had no opinions about tteokbokki. She said that was very diplomatic. Ixio said nothing for approximately 30 seconds. Then he said, "Who was that?" She said it was a pharmaceutical rep who kept asking her to dinner. He said, "Keeps." She said it had been the 2nd time, and she had said no both times. He said he knew she had said no. She asked why he sounded like that then. He said, "Like what?" She said, "Like a man who is about to make a decision he has not yet decided to make." He was quiet. She said, "Ixio." I said no. He heard no. "It is finished." He said, "If he comes back." She said if he comes back she would handle it. "I know you will handle it," he said. "I am talking about what I will do." She turned to look at him. He was looking out the window, and his jaw had a specific quality that she had learned meant something was happening in him that he was deciding whether to control or express. "You do not own me," she said. "I know. I am not a territory. I know that too." Then, he turned to look at her. "I know everything you just said," he said. "I also know what I feel when someone is looking at you like that, and you do not look back the same way, and I have to sit in the car and watch it." He said it without drama. Just the plain statement of a man being honest about something that was not comfortable to be honest about. She looked at him. "You are jealous," she said. "Catastrophically," he said. She said that was new information. He said he had been hoping to have it more organized before he gave it to her. They looked at each other. "I am not going to dinner with him," she said. "I know," he said. "And for what it is worth, there is no one I am going to dinner with except you." He said nothing, but the jaw did a different thing. The tension went out of it. And something else came in. Park said there was a tteokbokki cart at the next intersection. Zola told him she was starting to think he was her favorite person in the car. Park said nothing but adjusted his driving to reach the cart. He said one evening, when Jamin was asleep and they were in the kitchen making tea that neither of them needed because it was late and they should both have been doing other things. "You know what I thought when I first saw you?" She said he had seen her at the hospital and had not known what she had done yet. "I know," he said. "I saw you in the waiting area. Before anyone told me anything. I thought you looked like someone who had been somewhere that mattered and was still carrying it." She kept her eyes on her tea. "I was right," he said. She said that was not. He said, "I know it is not enough. I am not saying it is enough. I am saying what I thought." She looked up. He was not closer than he had been a minute ago. He was the same distance. But somehow the distance had changed anyway, had reorganized itself around the fact that something had been said that could not now be unsaid. I need more time, she said. I have time, he said. She went home that night with the feeling that the shape of something had changed, the way a room looks different after furniture has been moved. Not wrong, just different, and you have to learn it new. She was halfway through learning it new when the night in the storm happened. November had remembered itself. Rain that came in sideways and the kind of cold that Seoul produces when it is serious. And she had stayed later than usual because Jaemin was fussy and she had not wanted to leave until he settled. And by the time he was down and quiet it was past 11, and the rain was the kind of rain that means every taxi in the city is occupied. She was standing at the window of the living room looking at the weather and making calculations about the bus. You are not going out in that, he said from behind her. She said she was fine. He said the bus stop was 10 minutes from there in this rain. She said she had an umbrella. Zola, he said. She turned. He was standing with Jaemin against his chest, the baby asleep in the particular boneless way that deeply sleeping babies achieve, and he was looking at her with an expression that she had been cataloging for weeks, that careful specific attention that was not professional and was not paternal and was increasingly hard to give another name to. The guest room is yours whenever you need it, he said. There is no discussion attached to that. It is just true, she said. You make it very difficult. He asked, to do what? To keep the lines where I put them, she said. I know, he said. I am sorry. Then he said, I am not entirely sorry. She laughed. She did not mean to, but she did, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded, and she watched it do something to his face. Something behind the careful composure shifted, like a door opening briefly, showing her a room she had not seen yet, warm and disorganized in the way that real things are disorganized. She stayed. They sat in the living room with Jaemin between them and the bassinet, and the rain on the windows and a conversation that moved easily between serious and small the way conversations do between two people who have learned each other's rhythm. He told her about Mira. Not everything, but the parts that mattered. They had not had a conventional relationship. They had been friends first, and then more, and the pregnancy had surprised them both, and they had been navigating what they were to each other when the accident took that navigation away. I loved her, he said. I want you to know that. I know you did, Zola said. I saw her face when she found him. He was quiet. She loved you, Zola said. Whatever the complication was, whatever was unfinished. She loved you. It was in how she said his name. He pressed his lips together briefly. Then he said, thank you. She said he did not have to thank her for the truth. I thank you for the way you said it, he said. The rain kept on. Jaemin slept. Somewhere in the conversation, in the easy movement between serious and small, the distance that had been reorganizing itself found its final shape. She was not entirely sure who moved first. She thought it was him. She thought he leaned slightly toward her, a single controlled centimeter in the way he did most things, and she thought she closed the rest of it, which told her something about herself. He kissed her with the same quality of attention he brought to everything. Not rushed, not performing urgency, just present, entirely present, in the specific way that she had been noticing for weeks and had been telling herself was not affecting her. It was affecting her. Afterward, they were both very still for a moment. His forehead came to rest against hers, and they stayed there in the quiet of it. I am afraid, she said. He asked of what? Of being wrong about you, she said. He said, what would that look like? She said she thought he knew. I do know, he said. I am afraid of the same thing in reverse. I am afraid that you are here partly because of her, because of what she asked you, and that the line between that and what you actually feel is one you cannot see clearly yet. She looked at him. That is a fair thing to be afraid of, she said. I have been asking myself that question for 6 weeks, she said. He asked what the answer was. I do not think she asked me to feel this way, she said. I think she asked me to stay, and I stayed because I wanted to. And what I feel now is separate from why I stayed. He looked at her. Are you sure? He said. I am not sure of anything, she said. But I am sure of that. He exhaled slowly. He took her hand. Not dramatically. Just held it, fingers resting against hers. Jaemin made a small sound in the bassinet. Neither of them moved. If you have made it this far and you are feeling everything you are supposed to feel, this is the moment to subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me whose side you are on because it is about to get a lot more dangerous before it gets resolved. Stay with me. The problem with loving a man like Kwon Ixio, which Zola had not fully acknowledged she was doing until approximately 3 weeks after the night in the storm, was that the world that had shaped him was not finished with him. The rival, Oh Sang-won, was younger than Ixio, louder, less disciplined, with a reputation for making points through means that were creative rather than clean. He had a disagreement with Ixio that was 3 months old and apparently still unresolved, and he had decided that the most efficient way to deliver a message to Kwon Ixio was through the woman who had recently become a notable presence in his household. Zola did not know any of this when she came home on a Wednesday evening to find 2 men she did not recognize standing outside her building. She knew something was wrong because in 2 years of living on that street, she had never seen those particular faces, and the way they were standing was the way people stand when they are waiting for something specific. She took out her phone and walked past them. One of them said her name. She kept walking. They followed. She called the only number she had that she knew would be answered immediately. He picked up on the first ring. She said there were 2 men following her from her building, and she did not know them. The quality of the silence on the other end of the line lasted approximately 1.5 seconds. Then he told her to keep walking, not to stop, not to look back, and gave her the name of a convenience store 3 blocks away. She went. She was inside for 9 minutes before he called back and told her it was handled. She asked what that meant. He said it meant they were gone and would not come back. She said, "What did you do?" He said, "I made a call." She said his name. He said yes. She said what was happening. What was this? He was quiet for a moment. "I need to tell you some things about who I am," he said. "I already know some things about who you are," she said. "I know you do," he said. "I have been telling myself it does not involve me," she said. "I told myself the same thing," he said. She went back to his apartment because the alternative was going home to an address that 2 people who should not have it apparently had. He stood across the kitchen island and told her things. Not everything. She understood there were things he was not telling her, and she understood why, and she did not push. What he told her was organized and direct and more honest than she had expected. He told her that his name in certain circles of Seoul carried a weight that sometimes transferred to people associated with him. He told her he had not moved quickly enough when he realized she had become associated with him. He told her he was sorry. He said it the way he said everything. Without performance. Just true. "Is Jamin safe?" she said. "Always," he said. "Am I?" she said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said. She believed him, and she was not entirely sure why she believed him so completely on a thing that probably warranted more scrutiny. She thought about the fact that she had sat across from him in a restaurant for 2 hours and had not once gotten the feeling that he was managing her. She had gotten the feeling that he was being very careful with her, which is different. Managing someone is about control. Being careful with someone is about value. "I am not moving out of my apartment," she said. "I know," he said, "but I will accept the security. I already assigned it 3 weeks ago," he said. She stared at him. "I know," he said before she could speak. "That is invasive," she said. "I know that too," he said. "You should have told me," she said. "Yes, I should have. I am telling you now." She was angry. She was also aware that 3 weeks ago, if he had told her, she would have said no. She picked up Jamin from the nursery because he had started making the pre-cry sound, and she held him, and he was quiet immediately, and she stood in the nursery doorway with Ixio a few feet away watching her hold his son, and neither of them said anything for a while. "Stay tonight," he said. "Just tonight." The guest room. She said she had work tomorrow. He said Park would drive her at whatever time she needed. She stayed. She lay in the guest room, which was a guest room in the same way that some people's definitions of spare are other people's definitions of hotel, and she looked at the ceiling and thought about where she was and how she had arrived here from a bus stop bench and a level of exhaustion she had been planning to address with house slippers. She thought about Mira. She thought about how sometimes a dying woman's last words are not just grief. Sometimes they are seeing something that the living have not caught up to yet. She thought about the way he had said her name in the restaurant. First time, careful, like he was testing the weight of it. She thought about the way he had stood when she walked in. She thought about the fact that she was thinking about these things, which meant something. She went asleep. The betrayal came from Oh Sang-won's second attempt. Zola found out what was happening through a young journalist who came to the clinic one afternoon and told her he had received documents, anonymous, suggesting she had been employed by a competing interest to infiltrate the Kwon household. That her presence there was not accidental. That her actions at the accident scene had been planned. She stood in the clinic corridor and looked at the journalist and felt something cold move through her. "That is not true," she said. He said he believed her, but the documents were detailed and had been sent to multiple outlets. Someone wanted this story told. She called Ixio from the stairwell and said everything. Directly. Without managing the information. She said there were documents that said she had been planted. She needed him to know she had not been, and she understood if he needed to. He interrupted her. "I know you were not planted," he said. She asked how. "Because I had you investigated 3 weeks after we met," he said. There was a silence. "Before I asked you to come that first evening," he said. "I know who you are. I know where you come from. I know your clinic record. I know about your mother in Accra and your brothers. I know that you left Ghana at 23 with 2 suitcases, and that you have not gone back since because the ticket costs are what they cost, and you have been sending money home for 2 years and keeping the leftover for house slippers apparently." She said, "You knew about the slippers." He said, "Park mentioned the slippers. It was a sidebar." She put her hand over her face. He told her he knew it was invasive and he knew she was angry and he was not asking her not to be, but he needed her to know that who she was not someone who had been planted, and anyone suggesting otherwise was going to find that position very difficult to maintain. She asked what that meant. He said it meant he was going to make some calls. She said his name. He said within reasonable and lawful limits. Just the particular application of resources to a narrative problem. She said that was somehow the most specific and least specific thing he had said to her. He said to come home, and he would explain everything. She noticed that he had said come home and not come over. She noticed and did not say anything and thought about it the entire commute. Within 48 hours, the anonymous documents had been traced to a source, and 3 of the 4 outlets that had received them decided not to run the story. Oh Sang-won made one more attempt, sending someone to sit in the waiting area across from the clinic entrance for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he was not there. Zola did not ask what had happened. She understood that there were answers to that question that existed in the gray architecture of Kwon Ixio's world that she was not going to be given in terms she could fully approve of, and she had made a separate peace with the parts of him she was not able to fully see. This was not naivety. This was a specific adult decision made with her eyes open. "I know what you are doing," he said one evening. She asked what she was doing. "You are holding the thing you cannot endorse and still choosing," he said. She asked if that was a problem for him. "No," he said immediately. "It is the most honest thing anyone has done with me in a long time." She said she needed things from him in return. He said to tell him. She said she needed him to tell her when something was coming. Not after, but before if he could. He said yes. She said she needed Jamin to know the world as a safe place, that whatever happened around them his world stayed safe. He said always. That was never a question. She said she needed him to stop investigating people she loved without telling her first. He looked at her. She said she knew he had done it because he was being careful with her, but it could not keep happening without her knowledge. He said fair. Also the slippers thing, she said. He said he would tell Park. She asked tell Park what exactly. He said to stop providing sidebar commentary about her slippers. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you know they are pink?" He said, "Park mentioned that also." She covered her face again, and he made a sound that she had been waiting to hear for weeks. Low and genuine and entirely unguarded. Actual laughter, the kind that does not come from manners or social intelligence. Just from something being funny and a person responding to it honestly. It was not a small thing. Jamin turned 4 months old on a Tuesday, and Ixio made breakfast for the occasion, which was eggs and toast that were slightly better than his previous eggs and toast, and Zola sat across the kitchen island with Jamin in her lap, showing him the world, which at 4 months is mostly texture and light, and the faces of the people who are always there, and all 3 of them were in the same kitchen on a Tuesday morning, and it felt, in the quiet specific way of things that are real, like home. He said he wanted to ask her something. She looked at him. Not about moving in, he said, though he had opinions about that. Not about what to call this. He paused. He said he wanted to ask if she was happy. She thought about it. Actually thought about it, not the polite reflex answer. She said she was. He said, "Are you sure?" She said she just said she was. "I know," he said. "I wanted to hear it again." She said she was happy. He watched her for a moment. "Good," he said. "I want to keep that true." She said that was going to require actual effort. He said he had been known to apply effort. She said she knew. She had been watching. They looked at each other across the kitchen island with Jamin between them, and the morning light coming in off the Han River, and the city doing its ordinary Tuesday things outside. And the ease of it was the kind of ease that is not simple, that has been built specifically from weeks of complicated honest work, and it felt earned, which is the best thing any feeling can be. I need you to stay with me for this last part, because we are almost there and I promise you it is worth it. Subscribe, leave a comment, tell a friend. Here we go. 6 months after a November evening at a Mapo intersection, Zola was at the clinic when Park Dong-hyun appeared in the waiting room in his coat with his hands folded in front of him, which was his posture for occasions that had been specifically designated. She asked what was happening. He said Mr. Kwon had asked him to drive her to lunch. She said she had patients in 40 minutes. He said Dr. Bae had cleared her afternoon. She looked at him and asked if Dr. Bae knew why. He said Mr. Kwon had told her it was personal, and she had said, quote, finally, and cleared the afternoon. Zola looked at the ceiling briefly. She got her coat. He drove her to a small restaurant near the Han. Not the cleared-out restaurant of their first meeting. A real one, ordinary, occupied by ordinary people eating ordinary things. He was already there. He stood when she arrived, which she had stopped telling herself she was not going to keep noticing because she was always going to notice it. She sat down. He slid something across the table. It was a ring. Not large, not performing. Something precise and true, the kind of thing chosen by someone who was paying specific attention to a specific person. She would find out later that he had spent 3 weeks on it, had consulted Park on her aesthetic preferences, had made a jeweler in Insadong show him 47 options before he found the right one, and had carried it in his coat pocket for 11 days before today, because he had been waiting for a day that felt like the right wait, not momentous, not staged, just true. I am not asking because of Jaemin, he said, though I want Jaemin to have what he deserves to have. I am not asking because of what happened at that intersection, though what happened there showed me who you are, and I will not forget it. I am asking because I have spent 6 months learning you, and I am not finished, and I want the rest of the time to keep learning you. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. She said he had cleared her afternoon. He said he had cleared her afternoon. She said Dr. Bae had said finally. He said Dr. Bae was very perceptive. She said he was going to have to be patient with her, not because she was unsure, but because she did things carefully, always had. He said, I know. I have been watching. She picked up the ring. She held it. It was the right weight. The exact right weight. She said yes. He put the ring on her finger. It fit. He said he had researched the size. She said she knew he had. He said Park had helped. She said of course he had. She laughed, and he held her hand across the table in the ordinary restaurant with ordinary people around them, and outside the Han moved in its slow, permanent way, and everything that had started in blood and smoke and a dying woman's last words had found its way here, to this table, to this ring, to 2 people who had been careful with each other from the beginning and had found, in all that carefulness, something that was going to last. They did not tell many people immediately. They sat with it for 2 days, just the 3 of them, Jaemin unaware of any specific development, but responding to the particular quality of the apartment, which had changed, which had a different warmth to it in the way that spaces hold and reflect the feeling of the people in them. On the 3rd morning, Park arrived for his usual time, and Zola held up her left hand as she passed him in the hallway on her way to check on Jaemin, and Park Dong-hyun, who had never once in the months she had known him failed to maintain his professional composure, made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. She turned and looked at him. He said congratulations, and the composure was back immediately, fully reassembled in approximately 1 second, but she had seen what was under it, and she kept that with her for a long time. She thanked him. It was a foregone conclusion, he said. From the waiting room. She said it really was not. From my perspective it was, he said, and then he almost smiled, which was the first time she had seen that, and she decided he was the funniest person she knew in the specific way of people who are funniest when they are not trying to be. 8 months later, Zola and Kwon Ixio were married in a ceremony that was small and specific and entirely them, in a room overlooking the river, with Park Dong-hyun in the front row looking professionally composed and visibly moved, and Jaemin in the arms of the woman he had called Amma since the morning his 4-month-old self had made a sound aimed at her face, and the sound had come out that way, and neither of them had corrected him. And on the morning that Zola stood at the window of their apartment and turned around to face her husband with a particular expression, an expression that was surprised and certain and quietly enormous, and said his name, and he came to her immediately because he was always moving toward her, and she took his hand and placed it against her. He understood immediately in the way that he understood things, without needing it said out loud. The quality of his face in that moment was the most unguarded she had ever seen it. All of it present. The history and the loss and the impossible good of what was standing in front of him. She watched that architecture come down completely in the space of 1 second. Just fall. Just be gone. He pressed his forehead to hers. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Then he said Jaemin was going to be insufferable about this, and she said he was going to tell everyone at playgroup, and he said he was going to tell everyone everywhere, and she said he had already told the delivery man last week about the time Ixio had burned rice twice, and Ixio said that was wildly out of proportion to the actual rice events. And she said was there a second rice event she had not been informed about, and he said the second rice event was not up for discussion. She laughed again. He held her face in his hands. He looked at her with the specific quality of a man who has learned the exact value of something and is never going to take it for granted again. He said thank you. She asked for what? For staying, he said. Every time. From the first time. She thought about the bench outside the clinic. She thought about the 4 minutes she had given herself before the bus. She thought about the sound like physics breaking and her feet moving toward a sedan she should not have approached, and a woman in a yellow coat who had seen something in the available options that Zola herself had not yet seen. I was just the one who was there, she said. No, he said quietly, with a certainty that was not argument and was not performance. You were the one who chose to be there. Every time. That is different. She thought about how long she had been telling herself it was circumstance. She thought about the yellow curtain and the novel notes, and the drawer Park had cleared without being asked. She thought about every day she had arrived at the apartment, and the weight of the day had reorganized itself, had found a different shape, had felt manageable in the way that things feel manageable when you are not managing them alone. She had chosen. Every day, she had chosen. Outside, in the next room, Jaemin was awake. They could hear him. The specific morning sound of a toddler who has decided that the day should begin, a sound that was part demand and part announcement, and entirely himself. He would be standing in the crib. He would be looking at the door. He would be waiting for someone to come. In a minute they would go in. They would find him standing there with his hair going in 3 directions, and his expression of complete confidence in the world. And he would see them both in the doorway together, and he would say what he had been saying for months now, with the casual certainty of someone who has simply always known how the story ends. He would say, Amma Appa, and they would go to him. Jaemin would grow up knowing that his Amma had the most calming voice, and that his Appa explained things like the mechanics of bridges, and that Park could be reached in emergencies and also non-emergencies, depending on your definition of emergency. He would know that dinner happened at the same table every night. He would know that someone always came when he called. That is enough. That is, honestly, everything. Shinmira is never mentioned by name again after that night. But she is in the room every time Jaemin laughs, every time Zola holds him, every time Ixio watches the two of them and feels something settle in him that used to be empty. She asked for the right thing, and the right people answered. If this story held you from beginning to end, you already know what to do. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe that good things still happen. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that will not let you go, and comment below with one word for how you are feeling right now. Just one word. I will read every single one.